Okay, welcome back everyone to episode, I believe it's 9 of the N.E.S.T podcast. Now, before we get off to this wonderful adventure, I need to quickly mention that anyone watching on YouTube, I'm wearing something a little bit different than I normally would. Now, this is a red panda onesie, and I basically got told by my girlfriend I was going to change. She was like, nah, just wear it. So here we are. I'm wearing a panda onesie. Look like a little bit of a melt, but it's fine. I might even put the hood up. I don't know. Depends. We'll see how it goes. There we go. The hood's up. Now, what are we talking about today? So today we're talking about hypoxia and altitude masks. Now, let's get this off So, altitude masks. What are they? They had a massive craze back in, I can't even remember when it was. It must have been like 2016. I think it may have been. Basically, they had a massive craze, which was, I don't really know why it was. They're completely, not useless. I don't want to say they're useless, but they're not exactly useful. So, what people thought they did is they thought it was basically resembling altitude so they could, get more red blood cells, basically just train at altitude without being at altitude, if that makes sense. Don't know why people thought they'd do that. It's kind of a stupid idea, but hey ho, it is what it is. So, before we go into this, there's a few bits that we need to cover before looking at, altitude masks. Do they work? Don't they work? What's up with them? So, here is what is hypoxia? Well, to start off with, there's hypoxia and there's hypoxemia. Now, they're a little bit different. I'd never heard of the word hypoxemia before this. So, hypoxemia is the lack of oxygen in the blood, while hypoxia is the lack of oxygen in the blood to meet the requirements of the tissues. Now, those are very similar, but hypoxia is a result of hypoxemia. Regardless of the cause, apparently, skeletal muscles adapt to deal with the reduction of oxygen, be it acute or chronic. Now, having said that, there is a maximum level at which you can live and regularly function on. So there is a maximum altitude of, I believe it is about 17,500 feet. Okay, which would take us to about 5.75 kilometers above sea level. That is the upper limit for permanent residence, because after that, your body starts to, let's just say it starts to dislike you. So, we know that muscles can adapt to deal with reduction in oxygen, whether it's acute or chronic. We know that. That's great. So what are the effects of, why is it that you've got an upper residential limit? That wouldn't make sense. If your muscles and stuff can deal with it, why is there an upper residence limit? Well, effects of chronic hypoxia are as follows. Protein degradation is much larger than protein synthesis. So degradation occurs at a much faster rate than synthesis does. And that increases. So that ratio between how much protein breaks down and how much proteins get synthesized increases, which means that eventually your body's going to run out. Inflammation increases. Decrease in physical activity, sleep decreases, and as well as appetite. Now, we will go into the ins and outs of hypoxia in a little bit, because it's very interesting. It's very interesting. You'd think that, if you reduce the oxygen intake, you'd think that would make you hypoxic. However, that does not. That does not make you hypoxic at all. Now, so basically, all of the effects of chronic hypoxia will lead to muscle atrophy and strength loss. Now, muscle atrophy, obviously, that's not a big issue if it's just atrophying for a little bit. However, if the atrophy continues and continues and continues, you eventually are really weak and you don't want to be seeing that. So what is altitude training? Okay, altitude training, by definition, is athletic training that is done at high altitudes, preferably over 8,000 feet above sea level, or in an environment that simulates high altitudes in order to improve athletic performance. Now, that is from Merriam-Webster. And let's quickly talk about this. So, places that simulate it. Now, a lot of you may not know this. Some of you may know this. There are chambers which they can be hypoxic, they can be extreme heat, they can be extreme cold, all that kind of stuff. I was being a student at the University of Portsmouth. I have actually seen one of these chambers, and I'm not gonna lie to you, they're really cool. So Portsmouth is actually, I think it's one of the only places in the country that has one of these chambers that can actually do all four. It can do normoxic, hypoxic, as well as like cold temperatures, as well as like high temperatures. So that's really cool. Now, what does altitude training do? What's the science of it? What happens when you train at altitude? Very good question. Altitude training increases blood cells. This then results in increased athletic performance and endurance. So, by exercising at hypoxic conditions, your body needs to find a way of transporting more oxygen to the muscles, because it's hypoxic. There's a very large, a chunky lack of oxygen. So, can I just quickly point out, a lot of, and people would have heard about this, blood doping. A lot of people, let's say for Olympics, will train at high altitudes purely because, again, increased red blood cells, and when you come back to normoxic sea level conditions, your body can basically deliver a lot more oxygen to the muscles. That increases the PO ratio, which then increase or decrease the PO ratio. I can't remember which one. However, it basically means that the cost of energy, or you can basically produce a lot more energy with the amount of oxygen you're intaking. However, some people choose to think, fuck that, don't need that. So what they do is they cheat. They use erythropoietin, also known as EPO, or blood doping. Now, this stimulates production of red blood cells in the bone marrow, which regulates the concentration of red blood cells and hemoglobin in the blood. So this basically means that someone, without training harder, at harder conditions, or anything of the sort, can very easily just take this EPO drug, and they will have all the benefits that someone who was at 8,000 feet training their ass off, they'll have the exact same effects. So it's not ideal. However, these are very so I can't remember when, but there was an Olympics event that someone actually got disqualified because they were found blood doping. I believe, no shock, it might have been the Russians, said Trump. But anyway, regardless, so that's what you're looking at. So that's how altitude training works. It basically just increase the red blood cells in your body, and then that results in better athletic performance, endurance-wise. Obviously, it won't really do anything anaerobically. Now, there is also a subsection of hypoxia, which is called intermittent hypoxia, or IH. In a lot of literature, people just tend to call it IH. So this is an intervention which uses normoxic. Again, this means conditions at sea level. So that would mean, normal pressure, not hypoxic. and hypoxic conditions in moderation intermittently. Now, that is a very key word, intermittently. It doesn't leave them at hypoxic conditions for like 3 hours just to bust their face off. They switch it between. So this is done to aid a range of conditions, such as hypertension. It decreases arterial hypertension. It decreases weight loss. It increases weight loss. It increases glucose tolerance, so insulin. Strengthens the immune response. Enhances spatial learning and memory. That I did not know. I did not know that intermittent hypoxia can enhance spatial learning and memory. And it also decreases inflammation. Now, I don't know the exact science behind the decrease in inflammation, but I'd be very interested to find out how is it that living at hypoxic conditions, at extreme hypoxic conditions, may I just add, will increase inflammation. However, doing intermittent hypoxia will decrease it. I don't quite know how that will work. However, I'd be very interested in seeing. Those of you who know me, you'll also know that I am actually a participant in a study. Now, this study is actually looking at how hypoxia and exercise and sleep deprivation can affect cognitive performance. So basically, the study that I'm in, the guy who's running it, absolute gem. He basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in one day. I'm going to exercise on a bike. I'm going to then, this is by the way, completely normoxic and with decent sleep. So just like you would normally, I'm going to go down, sit on a bike, exercise, do a cognitive task. Following that, I'm going to then go back home, and then 2 days later, the next day, I'm going to go in, hypoxic condition, not sleep deprived, do the same thing, same cognitive task, see how that changes, and then following that, I will also go in, only sleep deprived, not hypoxic, do the test. Next day, go in, sleep deprived and hypoxic, do the test while exercising. So that will be really interesting. We're trying to find out, or should I say he's trying to find out, so we know for a fact that hypoxia decreases cognitive ability when you're under those conditions. And we know that exercise increases that cognitive ability, but we also know that then sleep deprivation also decreases cognitive ability. So we want to see, or should I say Tom wants to see, if two wrongs can make a right. So if sleep deprivation with hypoxia, if there is a significant difference, if you throw exercise in there, will that improve someone's cognitive performance? So very interesting. If anyone's interested in taking part in this, let me know. I'm sure Tom would very gladly have an extra couple of people. Now, so going back, got sidetracked. Intermittent hypoxia, decreases arterial hypertension, weight loss, increases glucose tolerance, strengthens the immune response, enhances spatial learning and memory, and decreases inflammation. So this is looking very good at the moment. Okay, now let's go into the whole altitude masks shenanigans. How do they work? So most altitude masks actually have a adjustable valve on the side of the mask, and if you've heard about this, you would have probably seen one. They've got an adjustable valve, and apparently what they claim they can do is they can mimic conditions from 900 to 5,400 meters above sea level. So we are talking, remember how I said that about 5,700, I believe I said, about 5,700, that is when, so about 5,700, that is when that is the upper limit for permanent residence. So that's what we're looking at. So they're saying that they can take you close to that limit with a mask. Now, what also do they claim? So altitude masks, or people who have used them, claim that it increases endurance, it increases mental strength, it also increases lung function, and it improves performance at altitude. Now I'm here to debunk a few of those, and to also confirm a few of those. Does it increase endurance? Yes. Does it increase mental strength? Debatable, probably not. Does it increase lung function? I would say yes. And does it improve performance at altitude? No, definitely not. So why did I say what I said? So the way that these work is, as I said, they limit the amount of oxygen that you can intake per breath. They basically limit your breaths. Okay, they don't limit the oxygen, they don't limit the nitrogen or the CO2 in each breath. They can't do that. What they do is they just limit how much you can take in per breath. Now, having said that, obviously your aerobic system works off how much oxygen you get. Okay? What also happens, apparently, is it increases lung function. That is, I'm not 100% sure about that one, because it may increase someone's, I don't even want to say aerobic performance, because if you're not getting enough oxygen, you're technically not aerobic anymore, surely. So lung function, I don't believe it would increase your lung function from day to day. It may make you better performing aerobically and possibly anaerobically. I don't know. There's been no studies on that from what I've seen. However, what I do know is that it will not improve your performance at altitude, and that is for one very, very good reason. The reason why people go up at altitude is because the pressure is different. It's not because there's less oxygen. Well, there is less oxygen, but it's not because the air is... I don't know how to explain this. Not because you take less air when you inhale. It's because the actual amount of oxygen in that air is so much less. So let me break out some numbers for you. So at sea level, atmospheric pressure is 760 millimeters of mercury. Okay, let's just say 760. All right, 760 millimeters of mercury. Nitrogen is approximately 79% of that air, so it's got a partial pressure of 600.7 millimeters of mercury. Oxygen, this is the important one. Okay, oxygen is 21%, which means its partial pressure is 159. Remember that number, right? 760 and 159. That's all we need to remember. Now, there is something called a diffusion gradient, okay, which is what the partial pressure of oxygen. So the partial pressure of oxygen minus the partial pressure of the deoxygenated blood. So oxygenated blood partial pressure minus deoxygenated blood partial pressure. Oh, that's a fucking mouthful. Now at sea level, that is 60. So you've got so it's 60. 100 minus 40, the diffusion gradient. Now the higher the diffusion gradient, the more oxygen, the more rapidly oxygen can diffuse across the membranes from the capillaries into your lungs, or from your lungs to the capillaries. The lower the gradient, the other way around, the slower it will diffuse. So at 8,000 feet, I cannot remember exactly how much 8,000 feet is, bear with me. So 8,000 feet is approximately 2.8 thousand meters, so 2.8 kilometers in the air. So that height, barometric pressure drops to 564 from 760 to 564. That is a 25% decrease. Okay, to be quite frank, I think it's like 25.7. But let's just round it down. We'll go 25%. Okay. Therefore, oxygen from 159 millimeters of mercury drops down to 118. Okay. Now it's PA, so PaO2. I believe that stands for partial pressure of oxygen. Also decreases. Yeah, so partial pressure of oxygen decreases down to 67. Now, there is a bit of a calculation in there which I am missing. However, so yeah, the partial pressure of oxygen up at that level, you're looking at 67 minus 40, so that's 27, right? So we're going from 60 to 27 of a diffusion gradient. That is a big drop. That's more than half. So it may not decrease the amount of breaths taken, however, it greatly reduces the amount of oxygen that you need, amount of oxygen that you intake, per breath. Now that then, because you're getting less oxygen, you need more breaths. And the blood at some point cannot keep up with the amount that you have to intake. So you're intaking a lot less. Therefore, it has to generate new red blood cells, aka more hemoglobin, to take the oxygen down to the muscles. The mask restricts the amount of air that you can intake, but it doesn't change the partial pressure of oxygen or nitrogen or carbon dioxide. It doesn't do any of that. And that is why I believe that they're not altitude masks. They're not. They are, how should I explain it? They are just, I'm going to call them the Karen masks, because you know how every single person complains that they cannot breathe with the face masks on nowadays with COVID going around? Yeah, that's basically what they are. So what it does, it basically just reduces the available oxygen in the lungs, and it just improves the person's respiration. It doesn't improve their red blood cell count. It doesn't do any of that. So that is why I do not believe for 1 second that they would increase, that it would improve performance at altitude. So quick recap of this. At 8,000 feet, you've got a pressure drop by 25%. Oxygen drops to 118 millimeters of mercury instead of 159 millimeters of mercury. And the diffusion gradient then turns into, it goes from 60 to 27, which therefore means the gases, or the oxygen specifically, gets diffused across the membranes a lot slower, leading to a necessary increase of red blood cells. Now, moving on. So, we've got a couple of studies. Again, you know me, I love a good study. We've got a couple of studies that actually looked at, do these masks actually work? They actually took quite a few tests here. They looked at quite a few things. So, Polcari et al., 2016. Do they work? Kinda. Not really. They don't increase your number of blood cells, or your body's ability to process oxygen. It does, however, significantly improve respiratory compensation threshold. All right, now what is this? What is the respiratory compensation threshold? What is that shit? Like, Alex, it's all good you telling me stuff, but I don't know what you're on about, mate. So the RCT, or respiratory compensation threshold, the RCT is the point at which arterial partial pressure of carbon dioxide Is that of carbon dioxide? Yeah. The partial pressure of carbon dioxide starts to decline during heavy exercise. Therefore, this is basically a ventilatory response to lactic acidosis. Putting it simply, it's just when the amount of carbon dioxide in your arteries starts to decrease. That's basically it. Let me quickly PCO2. So, yeah, partial pressure of CO2 starts to decrease during heavy exercise. And it also, apparently, there's also an increase in the power output at RCT. So at that threshold, there's also an increase of power output. What does that tell us? Not much. Not much. It basically means that there is an improvement in the point at where your arterial CO2 starts to decline, and there is a improvement in power output at that point. What it doesn't help with is VO2 max, max heart rate, and peak power output overall. Now, what is the VO2 max? Those of you who have not heard the VO2 max, it's basically it's almost the gold standard of someone's fitness. Christ, my voice broke badly then. So I'm gonna look up the exact definition just so you guys know, but it's the gold standard test for someone's aerobic fitness. It's basically the maximum rate of oxygen consumption during incremental exercise, which is exercise in increasing intensity. Volume of oxygen, the maximum volume of oxygen that you can intake, basically. So there's no increase in that, so it doesn't help that much aerobically. There's no increase in max heart rate, but therefore, again, max heart rate, it basically, your max heart rate also shows you if your stroke volume has improved. Because if your stroke volume has improved, then your heart rate will go down. Now, since the max heart rate has not changed, it has not decreased, it has not increased, that shows that there is zero benefit to stroke volume, and there's also no peak power output. So when they put these guys on, when they put these guys onto training, their power output did not change. This is significantly, by the way. It may have changed by, 5 or 6%, but if that percent is not significant, then that is discarded as a good result as such. So, we've spoken about masks, we've spoken about how they work, we've spoken about altitude. Now here comes I don't really know why the hell people looked at this. Altitude masks and resistance training. Do these two go hand in hand? And I'll tell you that right now. Obviously not. Are you joking? Resistance training and altitude masks. Like, who in the right mind thought, you know what? Yeah, this would be a good idea. I'm going to put an aerobic piece of equipment on my face while I'm doing resistance training. Are you dumb? Like, why would you think that would be a good idea? Anyway, let's have a look. So Jagim et al. Back in 2018, they did a study and they looked at the acute effects of training masks on resistance performance, metabolic stress markers, and rating of mental figure. Now, what are metabolic stress markers? Do you remember when we explained what metabolic stress was last week in the BFR episode? Cool. So metabolic stress, just a quick reminder, is basically when there's a pooling of lactate near the muscle, because the muscle is basically contracted. It's contracted to the point where it's cut off venous return. Now, that basically, I'm not going to go fully into it, but that basically increases metabolites and a few of those things. So metabolic stress markers a marker is something that you can identify. So they would have looked at things like lactate, like metabolites. So they would have looked at those things that you know will pop up if there is metabolic stress undergoing. So in this study, 20 men completed 2 training sessions of back squats and bench presses. One of them, they did 6 sets of 10 reps at 85% of their 5 rep max, and the 7th set was to failure. So 6 sets of 10, and the 7th set was until failure, and that was all at 85% of their 5 rep max. Now, as I said before, what was measured? Blood lactate and oxygen saturation. Now, those who do not know, oxygen saturation is similar to what we were going on about earlier. It's basically how saturated was their blood in oxygen. Ideal oxygen saturation, you're looking at about between 96 to 99. So anything lower than 96, and you're kind of below the normal amount. So they looked at oxygen saturation, they looked at blood lactate. So, did they find anything? I'm guessing is your question. Also, before I carry on, they did one control group, and they then also did a group with a mask on. 3 men out of the 20 said that they experienced lightheadedness, anxiety, and discomfort. Obviously, you don't want to be seeing that. This is something you don't really want to see as a researcher, especially if they're doing weight training, and that's if they're benching or squatting and they pass out, that shit is not going to go well. However, the only significant difference that was found between the 2 groups was the following. There were lower ratings of alertness and focus for the task at hand with mask on than mask off, which means there's no increase in power output, there's no increase in anything of the sort in endurance, there's nothing like that. The only thing that it did find is the group with the mask on actually had lower alertness levels than the one with the mask off, and they could not focus on the task at hand. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, when you've got a Bane-looking mask on you, I'm not really that shocked, I'm not going to lie. So, resistance training and altitude masks don't really work. I mean, I could have probably told you that for free. It's an aerobic piece of kit. It's not going to work with an aerobic exercise, That's not like, it's like me buying a shovel to cook. It's just not going to work. It's good, a shovel still looks like a spoon, like a big fat spoon. Doesn't mean it's going to be good when cooking soup. Also, you see Meg there in the background just laying on the bed. Now, what other potential risks do we have? Are there any potential risks? Well, considering the altitude masks limits your breathing, it's basically like me putting my hand over your head, over your mouth and nose, and being like, no, you can only breathe every 2 seconds. And the breaths you're going to take, they're not even going to be that good. Yeah, I reckon it's got a couple of things, yeah. They carry a couple of risks that need to be taken into consideration. One being hyperventilation. Those who do not know what hyperventilation is, it's basically where you start, hyperventilating. When you start breathing unnecessarily fast and not intaking a decent amount of oxygen. Very rapid and shallow breaths. There was also, in quite a few studies, there's fainting to take into consideration. We saw that, there was lightheadedness in one of the studies. So if you take it a little bit too far, fainting can be a very serious consequence, which no one really likes, especially if you're running on a treadmill or something, you know. So, note, and this note is for anyone who has high blood pressure or other cardiovascular problems. Don't use training masks. Don't be stupid. Meg, I think I scared Meg then for a second. Yeah. Soz. But like, if I hate to have to say this, I genuinely do, but you never know these days. Some people are really stupid. And if they hear something like this, they're going to be like, oh, I'm going to go try it. No, if you've got high blood pressure or if you've got other cardiovascular problems, don't bloody use them. You know why? Because they limit your breathing. And guess what? Your blood pressure is going to go even higher. You're not, you moron. So don't use them. Be smart. Don't be stupid. Now, let's summarize this lovely, lovely episode. Again, this is a little bit short. I appreciate that. However, there's not a lot to say on these things. With things such as altitude masks and stuff like that, it's kind of just a very easy topic to cover. Now, here we go. Summary. The moment everyone's been waiting for. What is hypoxia? Hypoxia is the lack of oxygen to the tissues, or the lack of necessary oxygen, should I say, to the tissues. What does altitude training do, and how does it help? Well, the difference between the difference between the diffusion gradients in high altitudes and low altitudes causes the body to create more red blood cells, which will increase athletic performance and endurance. There is a way of cheating this by taking erythropoietin. Would not recommend that at all. And do masks work? The answer is they do a few things. A couple of things. However, with the amount of money that they cost, I don't reckon that they are a valid investment. I don't think people should buy them. I don't think they're necessary. Just whenever you go skiing, just go out for a jog. You'll be grand. If you go skiing, great. If you don't go skiing, well, just drop down to Portsmouth Uni and sign up for that study, and we'll sort you right out. All right, we'll sort you out. So, again, masks not really worth the money. I wouldn't buy one personally. If you want to try one out, then feel free. And finally, once again, I can't believe I have to keep saying this. Don't use them if you've got high blood pressure or cardiovascular issues. Okay. Now, quick shout out to Lauren and Vaz for sharing the podcast last week on their Instagram stories. I appreciate it. Thank you for getting the word out there. Anyone who knows people who are interested in this field, fitness, nutrition, sport, all that kind of stuff, send this to them. If they're interested in this kind of stuff, they might enjoy the listen. And if you do, let me know. Let me know you've sent it to someone, and I'll welcome them in the next episode, and I'll give you a little thank you as well. However, it is the time to finish this episode. I appreciate everyone joining. I hope you have an incredible rest of the week. And don't use altitude masks, kids, unless there's nothing wrong with you. And in that case, just go at altitude and don't be stupid. But yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I'll see you all next week, where we'll have a special guest. A special guest will be Megan. I think she was just doing like a little wiggle dance back there. Where we'll be debunking headlines. Well, news headlines to do with fitness, nutrition, and stuff like that. And debunking, I don't mean just saying that it's true, false, true, false. I mean we're going to be going deep into this. We're going to be giving reasonings. We're going to be looking at the articles that those headlines have. we're going to be going full on into this stuff. So do not miss it. It's going to be very interesting. The Daily Mail is not going to like it. And certainly some of their editors, or they're not going to be happy. But thank you for joining. I'll see you all next week. Have a good rest of your week. Enjoy the snow if you have some in your area. If you do, then damn it, I'm jealous because I really want some. But thank you for joining. See you next week.